Hi, welcome to this segment of Digital Discoveries. I'm Tim Holt, the Director of Instructional Technology, and today we're looking at something that's available to all of our math and science teachers at every grade level that is pretty awesome. And so we thought we would take this time out to show you something called PhET simulations. PhET simulations, you think to yourself, well, what the heck is a PhET simulation? Well, a PhET simulation are science or math simulations that you can show in your classroom. Now, these are excellent simulations that work with interactive whiteboards like your smartboard or your Mimeo or your other, I forget the name of it, but your other whiteboards. They're for math and science are at all grade levels. And so for this segment, we're going to be talking to our teachers about PhET simulations. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find our PhET simulations. And there's actually several ways that you can find that. One of the ways to find a PhET simulation is they're now part of the content repository in Project Share. So you can actually go to Project Share, type in physics in the content repository. All the PhET simulations that have to do with physics will show up. You can type in algebra, all the algebra simulations will show up. You can also find them in another place that we talked about earlier, hippocampus.org. That's another place that has the PhET simulations. Or if you're just not wanting to go through all that rigmarole and get from one place to another, you can actually just go to the simulations themselves, and they're at phet.colorado.edu. There's the website right there, and this is the place where you'd want to start exploring these. Now, I know that one of the complaints that people have in EPISD, and actually teachers have everywhere, is that we don't have time to explore all this content. We just don't have time. There's not enough hours in the day. And so that's actually the power of using things that are recommended to you, is that, okay, well, if you don't have time, maybe you need to check out some of these PhET simulations because you know where they're at. So I'm going to, I've logged on to my main screen here. If you were looking at it, this is the main live PhET screen that you go to. And you know you're there because there'll be a little video going. You can see that there's some videos, some sample ones going. That actually is a good way to tell if your browser will actually work the PhET simulations. If you log into PhET and nothing shows up there, you don't see the little animation going, then that might tell you your computer needs to load some like the Flash software or Java software. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in. We're going to click on these PhET simulations. By the way, one of the really neat things about the PhET simulations, they're out of the University of Colorado Boulder, is that they're always adding simulations. They're never stopping. So sometimes when you go to a website for students and you've logged through all of them and you think, man, they haven't added any content in a long time, that project's been abandoned. What's neat about the PhET simulations is that they're always adding content. There's always adding new simulations. So I'm going to click here on Play with the Sims. That gets us into it. And so you can see over on the right-hand side where the simulations for the contents are. So you can see that we have physics, biology, chemistry, earth science, math, research. So those are the topics right there: physics, biology, chemistry, earth science, and math. You can also have them broken down by grade level. You can also look at all the sims. There are actually even some sims in, lots of sims in different languages. So you can there actually are sims in Spanish. You can see over on the right-hand side here that there's just a ton of these in different languages, including Spanish. And so I know that a lot of times we're always looking for, does this have a Spanish translation to it? I know that that's a question that always comes up in training. And yes, indeed, the PhET simulations do have Spanish translations for them. So that's a cool thing. Also, through the PhET simulations, there's also an area just for teachers on how to use particular simulations in the classroom. There's a section on staying connected where you can actually become part of the conversation on the PhET website. They tell you how to run the simulations, but it's really not too hard to run the simulations. Let me show you one here. So I'm going to click back on my simulation page, and I've actually loaded one up already. And since I've got to go on here. This one is called John Travoltage. That's the name of this simulation. And so we're all familiar with rubbing a foot on the carpet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to rub John Travolta's foot on the carpet here. And you notice that he's got some electrons going. And now what we want to do is we want to touch his hand to the doorknob. So what do you think is going to happen? Ah! He gets shocked. So that's a pretty cool simulation. So let's do that again. We're going to take his hand away, and we're going to rub his foot. Now, of course, the more we rub, the more electrons, until finally, even if he's far away, his hand, and you can actually get the hand closer, and you can see how much do we have to rub his foot before that charge. It just discharges. So that's kind of a fun simulation on John Travolta. Now we can sit there, he's touching the doorknob, and we just do it all together. You can see automatically that it just goes. So we can actually put this hand way far away up. We're picking John Travolta's nose there. And we can see how long does it take before that discharge. He gets so full of electrons that I don't know. We're charging John up pretty far. So now we want to move his hand. There we go. Ah! So that's a cool little simulation called John Travolta. This is a very, very simple one of the simulations that's available in the PhET Interactives. There are ones that are much more complicated. There are ones that are much more, that probably was for elementary and middle school. But you can see here, I'm clicking on biology. You can just see that there's tons and tons and tons of these. I'm going to click, and we're going to do one in real time just to see how long it takes to load. So we're going to click on this one. It has to do with density. I know that density is one of the TEKs in the elementary school, density and buoyancy. And so it's going to load. It takes just a few seconds, but there it is, okay? So now we've got, in this particular one, we've got a block of wood. Now we can actually change that. Now you know that wood floats, right? So we're going to take our piece of wood, drop it in the middle of our pool here. We're going to add mass to that. We're making it bigger. And so now we're making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens when we make it as big as we possibly can, it still floats. It still floats. Now we can actually change the material. So now we want styrofoam. Well, look at styrofoam. It actually has, it's less dense than wood, so it's going to float even higher in our little pool. Now if we have ice, what happens to ice? Ice floats, but it doesn't float as much. Now, see, I hope you can see how you could be doing this on a interactive whiteboard. You can actually have the kids come up and actually change the variables. That's what's really cool about all of the PhET simulations, is that the students have control over the variables. We can control the mass. In this particular one, we can control the mass, the density, the volume, and we can even control what the item is made out of to see if it works. So let's look at brick. Well, of course, brick's going to sink in my pool here. And of course, if we had aluminum, it would do exactly the same thing. So now we can come in and we can add things that have the same mass but are made of different material. And what happens there? Well, let's see. Okay, so these actually have the same mass, but they're made of different materials. What if they are made of the same volume, but they're made of different materials? So you see, we can actually play with all different kinds of variables, and that's the power of these PhET simulations. They're very simple, but they get the point across very, very well. So I encourage you to actually start exploring the PhET simulations. Again, the website for PhET simulations is phet.colorado.edu. I'm going to pop that up on the screen so we see it. There it is, phet.colorado.edu. You can also find them in hippocampus.org. That was a segment that we talked about earlier. You can also find them in Project Share. So these PhET simulations are awesome simulations. They're there for elementary, they're for middle, and they're for high. So think about this. Can you match the simulation on PhET to something that you're doing in your class? I bet you can. Start exploring. That's the only way you're going to learn how to use these. Thanks for joining me for this segment of Digital Discoveries.